Yeah, we should be recording, so go ahead, George.
Okay, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to MyFest 23. And I'm in Pacific time, so it's Tuesday, July 18th, and it's 9:05 a.m. And we're going to run a 1-hour session today, and the topic is back to normal with a question mark, sharing student and faculty stories. And glad to have everyone with us today. See, and I know that our host Ken has already covered the basics of the fact that we're being recorded today and so on. So I'm just going to remind everyone that the chat is open and will be open for comments or questions throughout the discussion today as well. And it is participatory. We'll be doing at least one breakout, maybe two if we have time. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share screens. And
Sounds good.
Get us
And
going.
I'll inject, if you don't want your question or something in the public chat, as I always tell my students, feel free to send me a DM direct message in the chat.
Yes, yes,
I'll
please.
rebroadcast for you.
Okay, and let's go ahead and jump in. And let's see, and if Ken, if you would just confirm that you're actually seeing it this slide
Yep,
deck.
I'm seeing the full page into slideshow mode.
Okay, there we go. And
looks great, George.
Okay, great. And let's see. And I'm also, I just shifted computers a few minutes before showtime, which is part of our back to normal is creative computer sharing and so on as well. But welcome. We've got just hopefully a both fun and enlightening and not too distressing discussion today as we talk about what normal may mean in the summer of 2023 leading into, or the mid-year of 2023 leading into the later months. And our presenters today or facilitators are Ken Bauer, Paul García, Nadia, Pulu, and myself, George Station. And we're from different areas, and we'll have a chance to introduce ourselves individually as we go along. And what we hope to do today is a little bit of community building right at the start. So to make sure that people in the room get a chance to at least greet each other. Each of the panelists have a short story to tell you. And there are a couple of articles and posts to link out to as well, and we'll provide those along the way. We hope to hear some of your stories, whether you share them just within breakout or you are comfortable sharing them in the main room. And then the rest of the session will be just where do we go from here? Or where do we think we're going from here? And let's see, and we already talked about a little of this. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with check-ins. Recordings already going on. And again, just to confirm, we're only recording in the main room. Breakouts won't be recorded. And of course, do whatever you would like to do as far as camera on and off and renaming yourself and so on. So before we go to breakout, maybe I'm going to stop sharing for a second so everybody can maybe more easily get to their chat windows. And if you can, just briefly introduce yourself as far as the location, where you are in the world, or as specific as you like, and the time of day. Mood check if you've got anything going on, and anything else you'd like to share real briefly in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute so that people can get to the chat. So let's see, I'll go ahead because I'm in the Monterey area, the central coast of California. And if you look at a map, it's on the point as the Bay curve, the Monterey Bay curves around, and I'm on the little point that sticks out. And sometimes we have good internet, sometimes not. And it's a function of being at the end of an AT&T area.
Charles for the Canada represent. Nice. Canadian, but I've been over half my life in Mexico.
Let's see, and we see, let's see, Texas Community College. Okay, welcome, Scott. And
Germany,
Central
welcome, Heather.
Time. Let's see, and Ken, you're also on Central Time.
I'm Central, but we don't do daylight, so I'm actually shifted to Mountain.
You're so it's Mountain Time. Okay, and Anna, welcome, Portland, and Nadia also in the Monterey area. And Samud in Egypt, welcome. 7:09 p.m. and still not too bad. Evening hours, and a graduate student. Oh, wonderful, welcome. And Paul from Guadalajara. And
reporting from
and
Virginia.
Meg from Wisconsin.
Nice.
And Thea, Thea, would you please just make sure we're getting your name right? Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's Thea.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
Thank you. And welcome from Richmond today. And I guess I should, or maybe I shouldn't add that we are a quite comfortable temperature in the Monterey area. So that's one of the advantages of being near a very, very deep water, deep ocean bay, where that actually adjusts and moderates the climate. So we are not part of the millions of people under heat advisory, and aren't likely to be for the next week or so. That's just the reality of living in this particular region. It's always moderate.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Safe drive there, Amy.
Yeah, and Amy, yes, you're.
Hopefully you're doing that 101 coast route. That's a beautiful drive. I've done that a few times.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. And the chat will stay open, but I'm going to go back to let's see, screen sharing there. Let's see if it's being well behaved and goes right back in. So it looks like it went right back in. That's great.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see. And let's see. And I'll go ahead and start this. And Ken, please pick up on anything I miss. I know you're going to be setting up breakouts for people. We've got enough people.
I got those set up already.
Okay.
Groups of 3 and one of the hosts co-hosts in each one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So basically, this activity is a part of Equity Unbound's intentionally equitable hospitality activities. And so I pulled one up that is from one of the areas, and I'll share the link to this and to others in just a few minutes after we complete the breakout. But for this one, basically, we'd like you to just kind of think about and be willing to share something that you wish your colleagues knew. Even though our topic is back to normal, it might be about that, but it might be about anything else. Even though we've kind of got the agenda of talking about anything since March 2020. So if you're our faculty, when we say colleagues, that could be also be students or staff or administrators. If you're a student, colleagues may be your classmates or maybe faculty or staff. And if you're a staff or administrator, colleagues may be anyone else who's. So the idea is to think about the other people in your campus community, however you want to think about that as you're thinking about, boy, I sure wish they knew something, and maybe share that's something in the breakout. And we're just going to do this for a couple of minutes. So the short form of the conversation, and then we will have time later for broader and some wider conversations. But this is just to kind of get the conversation going and to briefly introduce yourself in a very small group in the chat. And only share what you would like, what you're comfortable with, and the same thing as far as any discussion after the breakout. Please only share publicly what you're comfortable sharing. Okay, and with that, Ken?
Sounds good.
I guess we should ask if there are any questions before we go to breakout.
Yep. Don't see any burning questions. I'll set it for 4 minutes plus a 1 minute countdown at the end there, George.
Okay, that's great.
Good.
So that'll give each person a minute or so to actually converse and
interact
within breakout.
Okay, so I'm going to pause up the recording. And then we're back. Hopefully everyone enjoyed their breakout room and some discussions. And take it away, George.
I think you're muted.
I am, in fact,
Classic student call.
all right. It is. Hey, great. The technology is working as designed. That's cool.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay. So is there anything that anyone would like to share out real quickly in the main room? Or if there's anything you'd like to drop in the chat before we get back to the slides, please feel free to drop anything, any thoughts in the chat as well.
Yeah,
That
we're
may have
about to
emerged. And
go ahead, Charles.
Charles, please go ahead, and then and everybody else, if you want to drop something in the chat, please do.
Yeah, I just commented in the small groups about how my my program, my whole university, I think, had a big focus on EDI this past year. But all those EDI events and professional development events were in person, with no requirement, let alone or even encouragement to mask, and with senior personnel not masking. So just seemed to be a big thank you for that, George.
Thanks, George.
Yeah. So it just it pisses me off.
And that's funny that that's the topic. And then it wasn't.
Especially the inclusion part might have been a bit challenging then. If I know, so we'll have. I think we'll have more commentary on it as the hour proceeds. There.
That touches on something that Meg said. Oh, go ahead, Amy, first.
So, if you wanted to circle back to that, I can talk after that.
No, go ahead.
What you're referring to, Ken? Okay.
No, you go ahead, Amy. I'm just filling.
Okay. Our conversations were about similar, not the masking part for sure, but also just the mental toll that that we've experienced throughout this, post, and not really having an opportunity to be able to talk about the impact that it's had on us, but also the continuing impact and kind of the lack of support, maybe from colleagues or from others, to really help us process that.
Thanks, Amy. I think that's really key. I was just going to quickly say, Kim brought up the point of when some of us did go back to campus, we'd be wearing masks. And even though we didn't feel we were in a risk group or not, and people would ask me why. And I said, well, I just think it's responsible for me to let everyone else know it's okay to wear masks. So I was trying to give that signaling. And when Charles brought up the point of high executives who should be giving this signaling, not masking was an extra concern there as well, for sure. And aligned. I'm at a conference on disability, equity, and STEM, and there's zero COVID prevention, zero UG. And then what Charles said, here in Texas, we've been back on campus since fall 2020 and back to normal, in quotes, fall 2021, no class restriction, no mask, and no expectation. Thanks for sharing, Scott and Anna, for sure.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing those so we can get a sense of the different geographic regions, how things are maybe being handled differently. And not necessarily better or not better, but definitely different policies in different regions for what is theoretically the same thing going on there.
Yeah.
And let's see, there we go. And
so shall we jump over to stories?
Yeah, I think it's let's go ahead and share a few stories out. And thanks for sharing those initial comments, everybody. And let's see, I think we're starting with, and with Nadia. And Nani, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the mic to you. And please let us know. And by the way, for everyone, if you did not see a link earlier, it's in the slide deck, but we'll also drop it into the chat. Nani did write an article that was published a little ways back as a journalism student, and she'll tell you a little bit more about that now.
Thank you, George. Hi, y'all. So my name is Nadia. I also go by Nani's pretty socially. But yeah, I am a humanities and communications student at CSUMB. I'm in my 5th and final semester, hopefully. But just a little bit about myself and the past few years. In 2020, I moved back home, which is Riverside, California. I continued to work I think at the time I was working at Chipotle, which was really interesting because that was like peak COVID times. And it was interesting seeing that transition. I did like online schooling, and then in 2021, I actually moved out of my family's home just for like my well-being, and I had become financially independent, and that was just like more change on top of that. So a lot of change was happening, and then on top of that, I moved back to campus. I returned to campus in fall of 2021. And here, this is when I started to work at my school's cross-cultural center. It's called the OC3. Um, and this is actually something that I couldn't mention in my article because I had just so much room, but OC3 is another just environment that I should really credit to sort of helping me find my, like, ground me coming back after, like, still during the pandemic, but like returning to campus. It worked as like a lot of support for me, and I really, sorry, my Alexa. Alexa, be quiet. I'm so sorry.
No, it's good.
Anyways, yeah, so OC3, I owe them a lot. I changed majors from biology to humanities and communications. And in 2022, I began my internship that I mentioned in the article at the Monterey City Manager's Office, working on I believe we mentioned in the chat, like a EDI or DEI initiative for the city. And that year, I found my passion in storytelling. I found my people, so to speak, and just really grew my support system. And this year, I've been just delving into my journalism experience. So that's a bit about myself and my journey. A lot of change that I've been adapting with, but it's been very rewarding, and I've learned a lot along the way. And I just want to highlight, I think support system is really like has been my strongest tool with like supporting me through this change. I know that's not available for everyone, but yeah, if you can, if just even one person could be a great support system, I really like to highlight that. But yeah, thank you all for giving me the space to share.
And thank you for sharing, Nani. And yeah, I invite others to take a look at that article and even share it with their students. It's something I did when George passed that along to me. Thank you very much for that, Nani.
Okay, great. And Nani, thank you so much for being willing to come in and share your story. And I know we'll have a little bit of time later for questions from the group as well. And also, if people want to add something in the chat or ask something in the chat, that would be great as well. And so tell me what, let's give Paul a chance to come in as well. Paul, you're on.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, like just for background, I'm a student of computer science at Tecnológico Monterrey here in Guadalajara. And well, I read this phrase like through the internet, and it looked like interesting to me, that you cannot find yourself until you realize you're lost. And well, like having that in mind, I want to talk about going back to what we now know as normal was to me. And well, like most of students, I like really felt lost when the pandemic started, just like Nani's article says. And I remember like it was yesterday, it was Friday the 13th, 2020. And I was enrolling in my last year of high school, and I didn't go to class since, well, I was sick, and received an email from my principal saying that due to the pandemic, we won't be able to go to class for the next 2 weeks. And well, those 2 weeks turned into a whole year and a half. During that time, I really got lost. Well, I used to be like that student that always delivered their stuff in time, obsessed with their notes, continuously learning about new note-taking techniques, learning techniques like carrying their 100 markers for their notes, etc. And well, all of that changed as soon as the pandemic arrived, and my routine was completely messed up. I started to lose like track of my sleep, delivering homework and stuff just by obligation, and also got distance from my friends. And meanwhile, I was in the process of getting into college. And all this came to me like from one day to another, and nobody knew how to deal with this. I started searching the internet for advice that could help me. But at that very beginning, there were only a few sources, and the advice was reduced to basically the same: look for something to do. And none of those sources helped me, but I had to carry on as everyone else. And after the pandemic, the experience did leave some apprenticeship. I had to learn to be resilient, and experience really helped. I realized that as human beings, we're able to adapt to any social circumstance and still carry on. And well, when I first started to get in touch with others again, I was not in high school anymore. I was entering into a whole new environment, college. And this new experience was exciting, but also frightening. Since during the pandemic, I lost most of my social abilities. And well, but after going through the whole experience of isolation, I learned to stop being harsh on myself and start trusting and enjoying the process. So it was like learning to relate again and saying to myself that it was okay to not know anyone and not to know how to talk to everyone. But in my mind, everyone was completely the same like before the pandemic, and I was the only one left behind. So that made me feel lost again, until I realized that the reason I was feeling lost was because nobody was talking about what it was going through, the traumatic experience of being isolated. And it was at that moment that I also learned that I needed to stop assuming that what people were going through and stop watching myself as if I was alone. And that if people weren't taking the first step on talking about how they felt, I must do that. So when I started talking with my classmates, friends, and everyone else at school and my personal circle, I realized that almost everyone went through the same process of feeling lost and needing to find their way back to them. And I was not alone, I told myself. And overall, where I want to get with by this whole storytelling is that we need to stop thinking of ourselves as individuals and more as the social species we are, and stop thinking that you're by yourself and nobody can understand you and your situationship. Reach out to people, and you might see that somebody has gone through almost the same process as you, and maybe their experience can help you find your way back to you, and start learning to love and trust the process, no matter how hard it gets. Even if you think you're not going to be able to make it, I think you can be stronger than you think you are. And start learning to be resilient. And like Maya Angelou said, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it.
Nice. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
And thanks for arriving.
Yeah, Paul, thank you so much for sharing that, and especially talking about that sense of isolation and thinking that maybe no one else is going through what you're going through, when only by talking or connecting with other people do we realize that everybody's going through something that was engendered by the pandemic in some way. Even though it affects a lot of people differently, everybody had to go through that and then find others that were going to help them through it. Hopefully we're able to do that in the room here a little bit today as well. And so thank you, Paul, again for that powerful story. And let's see if I can re-engage here. There we go. Oops. And let's see.
I don't know if it's on purpose, George, but it's just your background and not you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I actually thanks. I'll come back on. Yeah, for a second there. And again, that's part of our new normal, is being able to adapt to changing circumstances in the space that you're in. So I appreciated the technology moment from Nani earlier with Alexa. I had a real life human moment going on in the room here as well. And some of it could be shared on the permanent YouTube recording, and not everything could. So I needed to adjust for just there. Okay. And let's see, I think, Ken, you and I have our stories coming up next. So let's see. So I've got a few points here, but again, it's what happened since March of 2020 to now, and what is this normal that we're in now. See, I think I'll just say one thing about emergency remote learning. And I think that is that even if we didn't all recognize it at the time, it seemed to really flatten the hierarchy, if you will, the existing class differences and so on. It emphasized them in some ways, but it also flattened them in other ways. And what I mean by that is that in the spring of 2020 and even in the fall of 2020, everyone was having some kind of technology issues, whether it was being able to get a stable connection, whether we had people, faculty teaching off their phones, we had staff, people on campuses who were not physically on campus necessarily, working off of their phones, as opposed to in front of their nice big office computers or in person in the physical classroom at first. So all of those things said, we're all in the same boat here. And I'm not sure that that was universally recognized by our institutions, even though we were all experiencing these problems. And our IT departments, kudos to our IT people for trying to help with the facilities and the staff and support that they had and could provide. And sometimes that was enough, and sometimes it wasn't quite enough, but at least they were always there to help. Let's see, on masking policies, I put a couple of words into the in parentheses there, just to remind me and keep me reined in, because I can go on for a long time about the changing mask policies over the last several years. But in terms of just going with your wherever you are, you've got some kind of recommendations coming down through official health agencies and so on. And in the US, we had the Centers for Disease Control that were supposedly, conferring with the World Health Organization and so on. And then, of course, we had our individual state and local authorities as well. So it'd be very confusing. And it was even more so, as I discovered, because even though I wasn't on disability, I didn't have a disability, I eventually had to request an accommodation because I was personally in an official high-risk group, but also people in my household were in that same situation, had someone who is immunocompromised and so on. And so the mask policies weren't something to just kind of say, yeah, there's a mask policy. It was pretty important, and it remains important to this day in summer of 2023. And so that's something that has become a new normal for me. I've got a couple of examples, and I'll just give one of working while sick. In 2019, I think a lot of people just kept working. They'd get the flu, they'd have, whatever it was, and they just show up to work, they show up to class and just keep going. And they easily share whatever they had with whoever else was present. That was just the way it was. And then our consciousness was raised by the pandemic itself, but also as different campuses at different times would declare some state of normalcy and change the campus rules, then they would also, we put out this disclaimer, and if you feel sick, stay home, that kind of thing. Sometimes people would pay attention to it, sometimes not. So my current example was in April of 2023. So just this previous semester, we had group projects. This is an online class, synchronous online. So we met synchronously through Zoom once a week on Monday evenings, and it was time for group presentations. And on that presentation night, one of my students said, well, I'm not going to come on camera tonight because I'm actually in the hospital with COVID. And of course, I was appalled and sympathetic on behalf of my student, but it's like, well, why don't we just delay this group presentation to the following session? And it's like, nope, I want to present tonight, don't want to let my group down, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what happened. And that was my wake-up call that not everyone, or there's something that we're doing systemically that is saying it's still not okay. That someone felt that they had to do their group presentation, participate when they were in the hospital with COVID. This is a new normal that really affected me, and it's still affecting me. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it in the fall, but I'm going to approach it differently. Whatever word I thought I was putting out, obviously, it wasn't okay in my class to miss an important event. And so I'm actually open to suggestions from anyone in the room as well. There are a lot of other things that aren't COVID. I know we talked about things like that, but there are a lot of other things that aren't that. We've got austerity, at least in US higher ed. The word austerity is used a lot. There's a lot of budget cuts going on, program cuts, and so on. And those, even though those are always kind of in the background, they really come to the fore in the last year or so as part of what's going on now in higher ed. We've got I'm going to say the opportunity, threat, et cetera, of AI. We've got the political changes, the Supreme Court decisions that affect what we do day to day in terms of affirmative action, in terms of student debt, all affecting higher education in the US. And then there's this aspect of finally, who do we trust now? Was the social contract broken when we were asked to come back to campus, even if our campuses weren't ready, even if faculty, staff, and students weren't necessarily ready to come back? 2021, 2022, or now? And I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you, Ken. I need to get some water and so on. Obviously, my voice is cracking a little bit here. So, Ken, over to you, please.
Awesome. Thanks, George. So I'll add a little bit in. I took notes here. I chose to be last, actually. I'm the first person who filled out those 4 slides, and I put myself at the end. But I'd like to reflect a little bit on what Nani said, what Paul said. I wrote a blog post. It's linked there. It's just kind of the way I work. It's my way of putting down what I'm thinking into a set of words so that I could reflect on it. And as I was doing this, it was interesting to look back on these 3 years. And Nani, you brought up something that I actually forgot about. I've got this thing where every semester, tip for teachers that I got from someone else was some elementary school teacher, maybe it was a high school teacher, said she asked her students to write a letter to the future students of her and say, hey, these are the tips for doing well in Mrs. whatever's class, or whoever it was. And I jumped on that probably a decade ago, actually, where I'd have students record video or make an audio recording or a poem or whatever the heck they wanted to do, and just kind of messages to future generations that took classes with Ken about how things went. And I love having that in my my little what we call in Spanish the baúl de recuerdos, or treasure chest, where I can go to that when I'm having a bad day and watch a nice video of Paul sending me a message or something. But at the first semester of the pandemic, and I didn't have a big adjustment because I'm a foreigner living in Mexico. I'm used to my social network being online. This was normal for me to be in front of a computer all day. You can tell by the setup that I have in my computer room, and I'm a computer scientist as well. But I didn't have as big of an adjustment emotionally, psychologically, to working from home. This is my space. It's the same space I spent the whole pandemic in that I'm in now. But I realized other people needed spaces. Other people needed to figure out how to deal with what they're dealing with. And especially for students who were spending like 24 hours in their bedroom. Their bedroom was where they slept, where they ate, where they worked, where they studied, where they played. And it was a big pushback of mine not to force people to have their cameras on all the time as well, because I think that was just invading of their privacy. But some of my students, I remember their essays at the end of that first semester, because I made an exam question, which was like throw in free points, of course, which made them happy. But it was, tell me about how you are dealing with this pandemic. And a lot of them made that point that both Paul and Nadia, I think, made. It was, oh, it's going to be a couple weeks. And that it definitely wasn't a couple weeks, and they realized this thing's going to go on for a long time. So I reflected on that. I liked what Nadia said about reaching out for support, and I think Paul touched on that as well. One thing that I've been doing for about 8 years, and I really need to write about this. I noticed I don't even have anything about it on my blogs, but Paul experienced this where I, in quotes, force my students to spend 15 minutes with me every month. And it's a lot of work. It's 100 students times 15 minutes every month. But it was a way for me to give them a space to connect, and it's talking about whatever they want. Often it would be about the class or what their future plans are, but sometimes it was pretty heavy stuff that I needed to listen to, be a person to listen to. And on my walk this morning, I was thinking about, I always like to talk about trust, that I need to trust my students, but also whatever I was listening to at the time of a podcast triggered that I need to enable students to have trust in me, and giving them that space where they have someone they can trust, I think has been really important for me, especially over these last 3 years. So creating that space of trust, I think, is really important. And that triggered off what Nadia was saying about having someone to reach out to. And then also giving space for human connections. If you read my blog, March 2020, right away, I launched Edu Coffee, which was just my space to hang out and spend 15 minutes or up to an hour. People would just hang out, and we'd have a coffee break that extended a long time. But it was just it was hard to explain because people they would show up and they think there's a talk. I'm like, no, this isn't a talk. We're just having coffee and chatting about whatever. And they didn't get it. And if you check out the blog post, I link about Edu Coffee. It was my way of giving people a space to relax and connect with others around the world. It was really popular at the time. I was doing it twice a day because people were complaining that they couldn't make the morning session. So I had to make one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So everyone had an availability for a coffee break in their day. For certain colleagues, it was really important, that connection. They were going through a divorce and hard times, and they really needed to reach out to others. So it was really helpful for a lot of people. A colleague of mine, Alan Levine, who's involved in MyFest as well, you might have run into him. He did a podcast episode on OE Global about Edu Coffee, and it was actually kind of cool because we did an Edu Coffee and recorded it, which was weird because we never record it because we don't want these conversations recorded. But we had a special episode with a bunch of people who had been around for a long time. So if you want to check out that or drop in an Edu Coffee, actually, we're doing this at the regular time I do Edu Coffee. But I'll do one after we close the session. So I think making space for human connections was really, really important for me. And then it was just, I don't like the word going back, and I never did. I started railing against it when people started, pitching the going back. And I kept saying, I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. I want to take what we've learned and move forward. And I also keep telling my kids it's okay not to be normal, and they say I'm weird. And I say that's okay because I don't want to be normal. I don't want to go back to normal. I want to go forward to something else we've learned. And I've had struggles in that. We started going back in 2021 fall, and it was really uncomfortable for me to go back. I didn't want to go back. Students, we took polls in my classes because I was coordinating the groups, and I said, who wants to go back to campus? Who wants to stay online? And it was about 50-50. And so I afforded that. We had setups and nice setups in our rooms, but it was difficult. And some students stopped coming to class. And I was wondering why. And I said, well, I don't want to be here if not everyone's here. So it was like kind of this egocentric thing of, I want everyone to be here from my experience in the classroom. And when not everyone was there, they went back home. And I think it was also people were learning there was pros and cons to doing it from home. Including commute time, including all of the things that involve getting to campus for some. I have the luxury of I can walk to campus in 20 minutes, and not everyone does. And so we went through this phase. And even this semester, when Paul was my student, he saw it. There was this friction of, because I had faculty that weren't in the city, we had to do some classes in Zoom. It's just the way it works if we have faculty outside of the city and outside of the country. And I was trying to create an affordance of, okay, let's try to schedule most of the Zoom days on Fridays or Mondays, so that students don't have to come to class, to the campus for just one in-person hour, but the other 3 or 4 hours are like on Zoom from the campus where the facility sucked. And so I thought I was creating an affordance. And also I have a lot of students who aren't from Guadalajara, said they thought it was great. I could go Thursday night, go back to my parents' place in Tepic and spend the weekend with them. But my online classes are on the Friday or the Monday. And I thought it was a good idea. But some people said, no, I didn't want to move all the way to Guadalajara to be in Zoom all the time in quotes. So it was really kind of interesting, the different points of view of people of how we're adjusting to a new normal of applying what we've learned over these years. So that's kind of my reflection on that. I invite you to go and check out my blog post there. Yesterday was really weird. I posted twice on my blog in the same day, which was like raining cats and dogs or something. The other thing I wanted to make a point to, and I discussed this with George, is I kind of feel that I'm at a point where I'm starting to get a normal. I didn't participate in MyFest last year because I just realized I'm burnt out. I can't keep doing more things, and I did not participate, even though I could have, and I could have been very active. I made a conscious choice to not be active, but I am this year, and I'm starting to post on my blog. I'm probably going to start making videos, and I think I'm kind of ready to push into a different phase of my adjustment to what's happened post-pandemic. So that's my kind of spiel there. We got some time. Burnout was a theme. Oh, it was a big theme for me. Totally. I'm reading through the chat here as I wasn't paying attention while I was trying to talk. Yeah, it wasn't being taught in your classes. Good points there. Students stopped attending. Yep. Good points. Excellent. Excellent. Well, what's next, George? Oh, thank you for that.
And as soon as I unmute again,
Teacher, you're on mute.
Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, thank you for those comments. And I know that there are, versions of these experiences that we all have, and appreciate what's coming into the chat. I haven't been able to totally keep up with the chat. So I'm gonna, I think if it's okay, Ken, let's just open it up and see if there are people who want to share comments out. I know the chat's lively, so please keep going. If you're comfortable with what's going on in the chat, please keep following up there. If there's someone who's been, waiting to come on mic and share, this is a good time to do that as well. I think I have maybe one more slide, and we can even not necessarily
Thanks for the feedback there, Heather and Scott. Some good tips there as well for group presentations. That'll apply maybe to George as well.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, I wanted to point out this quote, and there's a quote on the slide, and the text of that slide. I realized that one of the things that we're talking about is accommodating what needs to be accommodated, and we didn't even do alt text, and we thought about it and didn't, but it's down in the slide notes. You'll find the text of that slide that's showing that's talking about stressed students, because that's certainly something that from wherever we're sitting right now, that's still going on, as Nadia and Paul described so eloquently. I got that quote up because it kind of summed up. This is March 2023 Monmouth poll that was in a, and I found the article with a bunch of links, and this is linked on our references at the end as well. A sense of some lingering abnormalcy may well be the new normal. And I think a lot of our stories have and comments are maybe acknowledging this, and it's maybe something that I would encourage our campuses to have a conversation about. And maybe that's part of our conversation today, where our campuses are not really stepping up to have the conversation. Then, maybe it needs to bubble up from, grassroots level, what amounts to grassroots level on the campus, which is the individual staff and faculty and students saying, I have a story to tell. And this is that story. And finding others who want to have that conversation within our campuses. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing slides so we can get back to the people, welcome back, or welcome me back. And if there are any comments people would like to come on mic to make at this time, that would be great.
Or more dropping in chat, whatever
Yeah.
works for comfort for people. And sorry about not having alt text there. I'm good about making alt text, and I didn't realize Ken has some really good education quotes on Flickr. He's a good follow as well for if you're following people on Flickr. And to make my students feel comfortable, George and I are working on those slides there, 10, 15 minutes before the presentation. So it's pretty normal to do
This
it
was
that way.
all very, very real as Nadia and I were connecting locally over the last few days as well. So I felt very much part of a group project, and I was kind of on both sides of the aisle there this time, and I really appreciate that. And it's also my reminder, since in about a month or so, we're going to be back with our next semester of classes. It's like, do I want to yet again rethink that group work and how that's happening?
I'm glad you're taking time out, Amy. I generally, as a rule, never gave summer sessions because I felt that was my recharge time over these 30 years of teaching. But I was leaned on this past academic year. I basically did double load. And I had a conversation with my department chair yesterday. I said, that's not happening again. Ken at 25 maybe, but not at pushing close to 55. I just can't do that anymore. So thanks for that, Amy. It's really important to find your time for sure.
And if
for
anyone
family
needs permission not to burn out, I think you hereby have permission from Ken and myself and Nani and Paul. It's okay not to push yourself to burn out in your academic work.
Yeah.
And we'll, if it's not okay, I guess we'll hear about it after the session, Ken.
For sure. And I will offer everyone to reach out before we close out. We're actually running up on time. And this was actually a plan. George and I were debating 60 minutes or 90 minutes. And we kind of went with the 60 minutes because then we'll run out of time and people might want more later. So there's a link to my blog post about EduCoffee. It hasn't been updated forever. It'll give you a little bit of the history of it. I talk about it in my post for this session. But it's something I do pretty well every day. I announce it on social media, so you can find my links to social media, and I do post out it, but it's usually about this time every day. And it's just drop in and chat about whatever. It's usually my colleague Miguel from Puebla every day and me. But often others will join, and we even had students join. If you listen to that podcast episode, it's one of my students, Jorge, who said, Ken always invited students to do this EduCoffee, but nobody felt, invited. So I just started coming. So it was nice to have him as well. Stigma related to taking time to rest. Oh, totally. George pointed me to a book, and I just listened to it this morning, and it was illuminating in that side of people not thinking it's okay to take time for themselves and reaching burnout. And
let me go ahead and just I dropped Nani's article link into the chat one more time. It's actually on the linked on the first slide in the deck, and I think in our references as well at the end of that slide deck. Oh yeah, Ken, thanks for including the session slides one more time as well.
The top, but I always try to include the important links at the end. Let me quickly share just to mention a couple things as well from the slide deck. I don't have a presentation note, but whatever. Future directions. And then if you look at the upcoming sessions, one thing I did link in case you don't have it, there's a calendar link, which will take you to a calendar view of MyFest sessions. The second one is the iCal format link, which is kind of fancy speak, but you can use that to include it into your Google Calendar or Apple Calendar or whatever. I do that myself. So I have the MyFest calendar visible when I open up my calendar every day, and I can see what's available each week. And then there are some references. It's interesting. Monterrey here in Mexico is with 2 hours. And so both, all four of us are associated with Monterrey. Tecnológico de Monterrey here in Mexico is where Paul and I are coming from. And then Monterrey there in the Bay for both George and Nani. And then I found some random links talking about, back to normal, and there's Nani's post. My blog post is there as well. And then some other sources that George found as well that we'd like to just kind of share if people want to dig in. I found it interesting to just kind of go into a time machine and remember what happened over these past 3 years when I was reflecting for this presentation. So I found that an interesting diversion yesterday. And maybe some of you are not ready to go down that path of remembering the past 3 years, but maybe some of you are.
Okay, and I dropped just the title and author in the chat. There's a fairly recent a book, an audio book called The Burnout Generation by Ann Helen Peterson, and some of you may actually follow her on online in one of the surviving social spaces. But
It's super short. It's like,
yeah, it's a short. It's just several hours, and it's like and the audio version is like basically a series of podcasts that were all merged together. And they actually have the voices of the people that she interviewed as well, going through various things, various stages of life. And it kind of skews to quote millennial years, but so much resonated with me, and I'm late second career academic. And so, and let me go ahead and decline that little bit of technology that just popped
I'll
in.
back that up as well. I'm definitely not millennial. I'm a Gen X, the forgotten
And
generation.
So basically, it kind of reached across the so-called generations there. I would recommend that audio.
And at least for me in Audible, it was a free read included in my Audible subscription. So it's not free, but
yeah. And I think we're right about at the 60-minute point, Ken, is that about right? So probably want to go ahead and we can stop recording. And I want to thank everybody. We will stay in chat for a minute or so afterwards, but let me thank Nadia and Paul especially as for just coming and telling your stories as students. They were so powerful, and really appreciated that. And if I don't know, Nadia, you're doing your journalism thing. Do you want to share any contact info or anything like that? And Paul, I should also ask if either of you have anything coming up next, if you want to share, or if anybody in the room wants to get back in touch with you about your discussion today. I'll give you an opportunity to do that now.
And I'll inject there as well. George and I, even pre-pandemic, we've been like scheming and trying to get some kind of group projects between our classes and all sorts of things going on, and it just never happened. And then thank you, George, for inviting me. It's great to finally do some collaboration together on this. So
yeah, we've been talking about it for a while and dancing around it, and finally did it. So maybe this is a part of our new
kickoff
as well as doing some more work together. That'd be great.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording. And then as